I'm Wendy Capewell, an experienced counsellor and psychotherapist. I work with so many people who feel that they're the only ones struggling with the issues that they share with me. Possibly, like many of you, they feel so alone. And so the aim of this podcast is to talk to guests who have their own stories to share, their experience of the struggles that they've been through, or maybe they're continuing to live with, offering their insights as well as their inspiring journey. So let me introduce my guest. Today I've got Tiffany O'Hearn with me, and she is an advanced functional breathing instructor, which sounds really technical, but when we get down to it, I think you'll understand a bit more about what Tiffany does. And I'm so excited because I really think that we don't breathe properly, and the benefits of it are just amazing once we understand how to breathe properly. So I'm going to hand over to you, Tiffany. Tiffany, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really honored to be here. And, as you said, my name is Tiffany O'Hearn, and I'm an advanced functional breathing instructor through the Oxygen Advantage. And I've been doing this for a couple of years now. I really was just drawn to the breath. And it seems such a silly thing because we're all doing this thing. We're all, usually I start everything and say, okay, is everyone breathing? Yeah. Okay, cool. Because we're all breathing. Yeah. And it's such a beautiful thing because our bodies are wonderful, magnificent beings, right? And so they're going to breathe for us. But through evolution and through, a myriad of other things, we've distanced ourselves from breathing the way our body actually should. And so functional breathing at its simplest terms is breathing for your metabolic need. And so if your metabolic need is to be calm, can your breath match that? If your metabolic need is to, run down the road for a jog, does your breath match that? If your metabolic need, again, is to sleep, does your breath match that? And so that's really what functional breathing is. And now, we can all look at how we're breathing right now for a minute, because that's the beautiful thing about the breath, is that it's autonomic, which means we don't have to think about it and it will do it, but we can influence it. And that's what I call conscious breathing. That's breathing with intention because you're doing it purposefully. And a couple of things happen when we breathe with intention. The most abundant one that I see is when we breathe with intention, we return back home. And it's a great way to try to check in with yourself. Where are my values? Am I showing up in my truest, most authentic self? And you can use breath in that way. Now, the other piece of breath, of course, is this wellness piece, health and wellness. And I was someone who spent a lot of time in the gym in my early 20s and, looking at mirrors and watching form and all of this. And it wasn't until I started studying the Oxygen Advantage that it occurred to me, if you aren't breathing functionally, you can't be moving functionally. No. And I thought, oh my goodness. So I've been doing this and no one told me because nobody really knew. And so if we talk about how we're supposed to breathe, our breathing muscle, our largest breathing muscle is our diaphragm. And it sits, underneath our lungs, right? And so it's this balloon structure. But what it does is it's our largest breathing muscle. And so it helps engage our entire core. So when we talk about back problems and low back pain and things like that, the first question is, are you breathing correctly? Right? Because that's where our movement comes from. And so when we're breathing, how we should breathe, because there's a way to do it and then there's a way to optimize it. And so I don't like right and wrong because I don't think that exists. No. But we can exist in a more optimal space. And this may be very hard for people when they first hear it. But I'm going to ask you all just to shut your mouth because, and I don't say that, I say that in a joking way, but also it has a point, right? So our mouth has no function of breath. And so often that's where we're breathing from. And so we really should be doing all of our breathing from our nose, in and out from our nose, because our nose is responsible for 32 functions of breath and our mouth is not. And
Wow.
yeah. And so that can be, that's the cornerstone really of functional breathing, is to simply shut your mouth. And it can be very hard transition. It can take often weeks. And that's not a bad thing, because you're rewiring yourself, so to speak. But what you find when you intentionally breathe, when you're breathing consciously, again, not only are you returning home, but you're also helping your health and wellness. See, we have these two nostrils here and one big mouth, right? And some mouths are bigger than others. And as we inhale with our mouth, what we're doing is we're taking in a ton of oxygen, way more than we need, way more that's useful. And then what are we doing when we exhale through our mouth? We're exhaling so much carbon dioxide that it really throws us out of balance. And the other key component to mouth breathing is at the seat of our nervous system. We have our autonomic nervous system, and we have one branch, which is our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight, right? Mm-hmm. We want that if we are being chased by a tiger, or, who knows what's chasing you, right? You want that to kick in. And then on the other side is the parasympathetic nervous system, and that is our rest and digest. And so as we are mouth breathing, we are putting ourselves in a stress state, or we're compounding the stress that we feel by mouth breathing. And so just to kind of illustrate this, because, in order to really understand it, it's best to feel it. And so if we put one hand up on our upper chest and mm-hmm. one hand below our breastbone, like right in the middle there, right where our diaphragm sits. And if we take a couple intentional mouth breaths, you notice your chest moving, the upper hand moving, right?
Yeah.
And as we do that too, you might not notice, but that's when our shoulders start shrugging too. And that's tension, headaches, and everything else, right? So now if we take a couple of intentional nose breaths and now focus on both those hands again. There's little movement up top. Is that your experience?
Yeah.
And then you feel your bottom hand really expanding. Yeah. And did the breath feel different when you took it?
Yeah, I guess it did actually, because as you say, you're taking more air, and it's going to be a mixture of things, not just oxygen, but more air if you're taking, because as you said, our mouths are bigger than our nostrils. Right. So that's going to happen. So I get that. The only question I've got at this point is, if you are running, jogging, the chances are you're going to need to take that more breath in. So wouldn't you then use your mouth?
And that's such a great question. And the short answer is no. However, if you go out for a run, let's say you run 3 miles every day, and I say, okay, tomorrow you're going to go for a 3-mile run, and you're only going to nose breathe. You might make it a quarter of a mile. You might make it half a mile. You might make it 3/4 of a mile, sustaining nasal breathing, but you might not, you likely won't make the 3. No. And so you'll say to yourself, well, that's okay. I'll just switch over to mouth breathing, right? Because that feels best, because you're used to getting a certain amount of oxygen in your body. But the difference is that as we breathe in and out of our mouth, or in through our nose and out through our mouth, we're shifting the gases in our system. And so in the presence of carbon dioxide, oxygen-rich cells are released. So if you were to put an SpO2 monitor on your finger, it might read 99. But that's not to say that the cells are actually releasing that oxygen. That's just how much exists. So we need carbon dioxide in our system. It's a very valuable gas. So if we're breathing in through our nose, we're getting quality air. It's helping. There's a gas that pools in our nose, not in our mouth. So it's helping to open up our whole bronchial system. It's helping to get all the blood gases into our lungs mixed. So we're getting far better quality air. And now if we're offloading carbon dioxide with our mouth, we've created a very large imbalance, right?
Yeah.
Because we've only taken in X amount of oxygen and now we're offloading way more carbon dioxide. So again, we're leaving performance on the table. But the caveat to that is there is a transitional period.
I was going to say, because, you could say that, well, you could run for half a mile and then continue breathing through your nose. But your body, it automatically is going to take over and go, there is not enough. You haven't got enough air in your lungs. Therefore, you can't. I mean, I'd be a crumpled heap if I tried to do that. Really would.
Yeah.
Just wouldn't happen. I just couldn't sustain it at all. So I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, surely this is going to take practice and it's not going to happen immediately.
No, it's definitely not. And that's, the great thing about our bodies is, again, our minds, is that our mind has this wonderful, wonderful assistance for us. It's called the RAS, right? The reticular activating system. I am so sorry.
That's all right. Yeah,
that totally just eluded me.
Yeah. I have the same problem sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So our reticular activating system is very helpful for us because it helps us remind us. So you can equate this to, and most people can identify with this. If you were to walk outside your house, say you want a new car, and you want this particular model of car, and you walk outside and you drive down the road, and you're out for maybe 20 minutes, and you say, oh, there's one. Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. And you, oh my gosh, they're everywhere. I just saw 7 of these cars. Well, you were thinking about it. So your brain helps identify it.
Yeah.
You just missed the 700 other cars that you saw. You were only focused on those. And so we can use this to our advantage in these times, right? Because if we consciously breathe once today, tomorrow you'll do it twice, but you'll only have to think about it one more time.
Okay.
So there is this transition period because you take your age and how long that you've likely been a mouth breather. And now all of a sudden you're listening to me and it's like, shut your mouth and never breathe out of your mouth again. No, there's a period. And so how much does it mean to you? Right? Because you might listen to this and it doesn't really mean anything to me. So you won't do it. And that's okay. But I trust that the ones that are listening to it, they're listening to it for a reason and for a purpose. And so it's to take those small strides to being more aware of your breath, because you can use it in a stress state. When you are feeling stressed, you can simply shut your mouth and breathe with intention, because you will help calm yourself down. You will be in that parasympathetic state because breathing also taps into the vagus nerve. And so as we breathe in and out of our nose, we're helping to calm our entire nervous system. And so, yes, there's a lot of opportunity within your day to nose breathe, but there is that transition where you have to do a little bit more thinking about it until you don't, do you know? And when it comes to exercise, that's the same thing. Like for me, I went all in. And so I would literally tape my mouth when I worked out, but I could not work out at the same level. It took me about 4 weeks, if not 5. Like I hike a lot. And so the first hike, I said, okay, that's it. I'm not mouth breathing anymore. And it crushed me. I had to keep stopping because my body wasn't used to the carbon dioxide I was experiencing. And so it was causing me this breathlessness. But now I hike and I guarantee I've not met another nose breather while hiking, but I'm far more efficient hiking than the next person because I'm more oxygenated. Because I'm less sensitive to carbon dioxide. And it seems like a hard thing to understand at first because it seems so counterintuitive.
Well, no, I don't, because I think, yeah, you're right. When we talk about, it's an automatic thing. It's what we do unconsciously. Our body will just do it. But what I notice a lot with people when they are very stressed, and I see a lot of clients who are very stressed, they just don't breathe properly. They only breathe very, very much in the top of their top of their chest. They're not filling their lungs up at all. I visualize lungs like bellows, and I say to them, well, if you weren't to fully inflate your bellows, you would never light a fire because it just wouldn't be efficient enough.
Right.
So it's really important that we do pay attention to our breath. And you're right. I haven't heard about the nose breathing specifically, but I do ask people to be breathing with intention and ensuring that they really notice what they're taking in, how they're taking it in. And yeah, that kind of lifting the shoulders doesn't do it, because that it's not filling the diaphragm at all.
And we can look at stress, and I don't know about where you're from, but certainly where I'm from, I feel like it becomes very identifiable for people, and it becomes almost a badge of honor to talk about our stress. Like stress.
I hear what you're saying, but what I'm talking about is, because I'm a counselor and psychotherapist, the chances are these people they're so stressed due to the traumas they've been through in their lives. So it's not about that badge of honor, I'm working so hard, I'm stressed. It really is, they have been through so much trauma that they are chronically stressed.
Yeah. And that's such a great point. And where I was going with that is just to suggest that when we feel stressed, are we supporting ourselves metabolically, as we talked about functionally, right? Are we supporting ourselves? And, I totally understand what you're talking about, because you're talking about a whole nervous system that is likely miswired, or, it's existing in more of this sympathetic state. Definitely. And it doesn't have the ability to regulate so much into the parasympathetic state. And where I was going with that is just simply to say, where are you supporting it? Where are you supporting your nervous system? Because if you're in a stressed state, you're triggered, if you will, your breath will likely match that. But at the same time, it's in those moments to consciously become aware and notice how you can support it the way you want to. Meaning you don't have to exist in that state. It can be a choice. But at the same time, I say practice it when you're not in a triggered, heightened state, because it will be much easier to do it when you start to notice it, right? Definitely. If we're taking somebody who's in a very triggered, heightened state and saying, no, this is be great, just breathe, it might be very hard to connect that at that time.
They can't, you're right.
Right. But if we can practice it here now, right? If you're listening to this, likely we're all in a very calm state, a little bit more parasympathetic, especially because likely you've been shutting your mouth while listening to this, right? And so that can be very supportive. And so that's why if we focus our breath more on the good times, right? The quote unquote good times in our life, the easier it will transition into what we might deem as those more difficult transitions.
Absolutely. And I'm with you 100%, because again, I encourage people to breathe, practice that breathing when they're in a calm state. Definitely. You're right. That's the only time. It just is that we know that when somebody is, they don't go into a calm state in their life. They're almost on red alert when they're in that. If they're really in a chronic situation, therefore they find it very hard. So when they're kind of on red alert, as I call it, their body is kind of, they're hyper alert. Right. Then they find it a lot harder to be able to do that and relax, because their brain is going at 100 miles an hour. But I completely agree with you. If you can do it when you're feeling calmer, more relaxed, it's much easier. And being intentional about breathing. I often say to clients, notice your breath. Really notice how you're breathing. And I encourage people to do mindful breathing, like through their nostrils. And therefore, what is the difference? Can you feel that breath going down? Can you feel it touching the back of your throat? Can you feel it going, down the tubes? Can you feel it coming back up again? And can you notice the difference in that breath? Now, not only, and of course the thing is, if you really do pay that full attention, the breath that leaves the body is warmer than the breath that you take in.
Mm-hmm.
If they're doing that, not only are they intentionally breathing, but it's a good distraction for all those intrusive thoughts.
And that's such a great example. And that is one way to tap into or to consciously breathe.
Yeah.
Because as we breathe in, you will feel slightly cooler air. And as you breathe out, you will feel warmer air. That's this awesome humidifier we have in our nose. But to your point, what you're speaking of too is, when we can consciously breathe, when we can come home in the good times, it becomes that much easier. It doesn't seem so foreign in the bad times.
Yeah.
Because if someone's in a heightened state and we're simply saying, use your breath to come back home, it will help with your nervous system. It will help regulate you. That could be a harder transition. But at the same time, another exercise, there's this exercise that I like to do just to help, sort of ground you. And also it offers a bit of a sensory experience, but simply just putting your hands on the lower sides of your ribs and breathing in and out with your nose. And as you do, you'll feel your hands expand with a breath in and return back with the breath out. And that, again, sometimes we need to make it as simple as possible to help with that, that transfer of how we should be breathing. And again, is it supporting you? If you're in a heightened state, I ask, do you want to be there? Right? Because all we want out of life is control. But as far as I can tell, there's only two real things that we can control. We can control how we show up, and we can control how we react. And both of those things we can take back to the breath, because how are we showing up? Are we showing up in our truest, most authentic self? And you can check back in with yourself simply by breathing with intention. And it goes to that reaction piece too, because how we react is so important, right? And are we reacting in our most authentic self? And so again, if we can check back in with ourselves in the norm, like in these sort of calm times where we can regulate our nervous system, it will only help transcend into those more triggering instances where we can become more resilient.
There's so much in there. And I think you've got a lot more to kind of offer people. One thing that people could take away with themselves right now, you've offered such a lot anyway, but is there one thing that people could take away with themselves right now?
Yeah, I would say that here is a little bit more power for you. I'm empowering you to step into your own power. I can't do it for you, but you can take control over this. And it's not going to be perfect. And you're not going to leave this conversation being cured. I'm a nose breather and never more. No. And we can have a little compassion towards it, and just one step at a time. If that means just writing a little note on your cubicle that says nose breathe or intentional breathe, just these subtle little reminders, because they will compound.
Yeah.
And I think there's such beauty and grace in that. When you can catch yourself, catch yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good. Being kind and compassionate and patient is, I think, the key. And I think, you've offered such a lot. I think there's a lot more that we could talk about. So what is an easy way that people can get in touch with you, Tiffany?
Instagram and Facebook, I use those, quite a bit just for, posting videos and, whatnot, just to kind of support, breath work again. So I could be found on Instagram. It's life_and_breath_. And then my name on Facebook. And then my email is tiffany@lifeandbreath.info. And, websites are coming. And, I also do one-on-one programs and some workshops and things like that. So.
Brilliant. Well, I will put all your details in the show notes.
Thank you.
But yes, as long as people find an easy way to get in contact with you. I thank you so much for today, Tiffany. It's been really interesting, and thank you for responding to some of my quite challenging questions I felt, but I think that I was really curious, because I do I know the importance of breath work and how it can support us.
Mhm.
But yeah, there were times when I wanted to know a little bit more. So,
Sure.
but thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your
Uh,
listeners as well.
I hope you found this episode interesting as well as helpful. And you can find out more about my guest by going into the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about me, then go to my website, wendycapewell.co.uk. And there you can also book a call and find out how you can work with me. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Until next time, bye.